Welcome to another edition of Spits and Suds. Thank you for making us. Truly appreciate it. DFW's Top Stars podcast. Your support in August. We've been getting some awesome feedback. It's amazing. August numbers equal to numbers during the regular season, and that's because of you. When the offseason started, we said, hey, we're going to continue doing programs, and you guys responded. So thank you so much. We've also been getting amazing feedback on our Central Division previews. We've done the Wild. We've done the Winnipeg Jets. We did the Blues. And today we move to Chicago. So I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit. We at The Fan take great pride in our show, Sean and RJ, our morning show. And that goes for Odyssey nationwide. So proud, super proud to bring on our next guest, part of one of the top morning shows in America of Mully and Haugh. David Haugh, so nice of you to join us, my friend.
Oh, it's great to be here. We're talking hockey in September, and I can relate to some of what you kind of described because the markets are similar in that I'm imagining, I've never worked in Dallas, but here in Chicago, like Dallas, the Bears rule. And in Dallas, I know how the Cowboys are treated. And then there's hockey. When the Stars are good, I imagine it's a pretty big story, and there's a niche audience that you're trying to service and serve well because they know the sport and they're loyal to the sport and they love the sport. And in Chicago, it's much the same way with the Blackhawks. Longer tradition because they're original six team, but there are times when the Blackhawks have been ignored historically. There are times like before the Connor Bedard era where they deserve to be ignored. But now here we are. Entering this season, it's been an exciting offseason. The Bears are still exciting, but it's time to talk some hockey.
Yeah, Bears, you got Cubs trying to fight for that last wild card spot. So is there a little hope in the air for this year's Hawks?
I think there is. And what's different about this year's Hawks is that you had hope last year, but you knew they were going to struggle in the standings and on the scoreboard. You had hope because when you draft a player with the quote-unquote generational talent like Connor Bedard, it reinvigorates a fan base that had been kind of tortured with the losing, with the scandal, and it had been a long time since a Blackhawk fan had reason to be proud. Bedard arrives, and now a new plan begins. Kyle Davidson, as a general manager, has done a really nice job of being incremental in terms of the progress. This past offseason, though, Gavin, in the way that they approached the spending, free agency, and with the moves that they have made, accidentally or not, but they've got enough veteran experience that they can legitimately say they're going to be more competitive. And I don't know if that means playoffs or not, but at least they won't be a team that you will feel like they're going to be checking tankathon.com every Monday morning. This is going to be a team that's going to be a little bit more, it's going to be easier to watch the Blackhawks this year.
So watching as much hockey as I do, I see a ton of Connor Bedard highlights, especially coming back from injury, how well he did to end the year. Locally, what's the Connor Bedard mania?
The Connor Bedard mania is that he is the one guy in town before Caleb Williams arrived that everybody felt like they had to see. Even casual sports fans in Chicago felt like Connor Bedard was somebody they wanted to watch because of what he can do with the puck, what he's like in the open ice, and frankly, how he sometimes just wills the puck into the goal. He's got innate sense. He's only a teenager, and he plays like a 30-year-old because of those instincts and because if he just knows where on the ice to be. He's got a really tricky way of, like the great ones do, like in Chicago, they're very different players, but Patrick Kane had a way of avoiding contact, so he avoided that big hit most of the time. Connor Bedard just has that sixth sense where he avoids those big hits, and he is protected on this team because they know his scoring prowess is as good as it is. So when you're talking about Hawks fans, they know a hockey player that's not afraid to mix it up and can also do things in a special way when he's got the puck. That's Connor Bedard. The casual sports fan, they love the highlight reel potential of Connor Bedard each and every time he puts on the 98 sweater. So it's appointment television when the Hawks play, even when they struggle because of Bedard's presence.
And that was a tough year last year for the Hawks as far as injuries. And I think everyone, because of injuries, forgets of the tough injury to Taylor Hall, and he's expected to be cleared and back. That's a nice piece to add to the Hawks roster.
Well, he can relate to what it's like to be a number one overall
Sure
pick.
can.
And he was brought to Chicago to be the guy to help Connor Bedard understand the complexity, the pressure, the expectations. And then he got injured, and he was off to a pretty good start. Now, how he will respond a year later, it's hockey. I think we've all seen guys come back from injuries. I think if he drops off, it'll be a little bit of a surprise. So they're looking forward to Hall's return, and they added some weaponry. We'll get to it in a moment, but they added some offensive weaponry to surround Bedard with some options, because you know what it's like if they only have one dangerous line, the depth, and you need players who understand what it's like to play with a special talent. Connor Bedard sees the ice as well as he's able to score. I mean, it's hard to, you compare it, you look at other sports and we see Caitlin Clark. Is she a better passer or is she a better three-point shooter?
Yeah.
It's like similar debate with Connor Bedard. Is he a better goal scorer or is he a better passer? The kid can do it all. So when you have players like Taylor Hall surrounding him, the more special type talent you have, the more effective he's going to be.
Well, let's talk about some of those weapons that were added. Who do you like that you're going to see on the ice this year for the Hawks?
Well, I was covering the team back in when I was at the Chicago Tribune as a sports columnist during the time where they won 3 cups in 5 years. And the third cup, Teuvo Teravainen had something to do with it. I remember Teuvo's debut at the United Center. It was electric. It wasn't what Bedard's was, but back in the day, Teuvo was the guy that helped them win the cup in 15, and he's coming back. So it was so cool, Gavin, because the story goes in Chicago, Kyle Davidson, who's a general manager now, was in the front office at the time Teuvo made his debut back in 15. Kyle Davidson was the low-level executive that picked up Teuvo at the airport, who would have dinner with Teuvo Teravainen to help him acclimate to being a professional hockey player. Now he's his boss. Now he gave him a 3-year, $16 million contract with an average annual value of 5.4. That means you got to produce, and I think he can. I like the Teuvo signing. I'm excited about Tyler Bertuzzi coming in to give them a little bit of grit. Yep. They need some of that veteran presence. You add Hall back into the mix. And I think that when you talk about offensive firepower, the guys that they have added give Connor Bedard the feeling that he doesn't have to do it all any given night, because in Bertuzzi and Teravainen, he's going to have some good options, and you add Hall to the mix. And I think the Hawks are going to be able to score with players that, are coming back who benefited from a year with Bedard, Khrushchev, and maybe even, I don't know about Lucas Reichel, but he's a guy that they invest a lot of hope in. So offensively, you can start to see a plan kind of come together for Luke Richardson's team.
I think many of us locally here in DFW have a rooting interest for Seth Jones. Good to see he came back from the injury, played for Team USA over the summer. A healthy Seth Jones. The question is, I guess, can he get back to the Seth Jones that we saw a la Nashville, let's say?
Boy, the Hawks sure hope so, because I don't want to say that he's been a disappointment, but he's been on some tough teams.
Yeah.
He's had a hard time, standing out, or standing out hasn't meant as much. And I think that he's been a guy that's been easy to point to, when you have a bad team in pro sports and you look at the contracts and who's living up to it and who isn't. It's been hard for him to live up to that contract because the teams have been so bad. If he's healthy, him and Connor Murphy give the Hawks something that they know on the blue line they can predict, and they can be stable. Kevin Korchinski, as a rookie, had some big moments, some big ups, and some low lows. He comes back, and I think they also were productive and I think aggressive in the offseason, adding a guy like Alec Martinez, 1 year, $4 million contract.
Love that
TJ
signing.
Brody as well. 2 years, $7.5 million for TJ Brody. So it gives them some experience again, where they don't have to rely as much maybe on the younger guys as defensemen. Seth Jones fits into the picture both as a leader and as a guy who can help you offensively as well. But I really like the Martinez signing. A little side note about Martinez: when he signed, I remembered back to 2014, and it was easy to say about Alec Martinez. He already is responsible for scoring one of the most significant goals in Blackhawk recent history, because he scored in Game 7 for the Kings of the Western Conference Finals in 2014, or else the Hawks might have won 3 in a row.
Yeah, I mean, his blocking shots ability, his veteran D-man in that room. I mean, I love the pickups the Hawks have made. It's so interesting because they're kind of the mixture of the young guns, and then they brought in some nice pieces, like you said, if they have to get physical, they will. And veteran guys in the room saying like, hey, this is how it's done, I think will certainly help. One guy that came to the Stars that was your 2024 Masterton nominee that I wanted to get your thoughts on. Really interested. Looks like he'll play on the fourth line for this Stars team. Colin Blackwell.
He had a really resurgent year in Chicago.
Yeah.
There are some people that looked at the way that he played and thought that's contagious. And boy, he's a good guy you want to have on the ice. When it's one of those things where he would have been a guy you love to still have as part of things. You're right. He's a fourth line guy. He's one of these prototypical hockey guys that you need in the room. He has some sandpaper and grit and all the cliches apply. But with the Hawks going maybe a different direction, looking for a little more skill, I think they probably deemed him expendable. So they're looking for a little more experience. But I do think the Stars have a good one there because he did nothing in Chicago to make them glad to see him go. He's one of those guys I think they're going to miss some of the intangibles. Let's
go between the pipes. How is this net minding for Chicago going to transpire this year?
Well, Mrazek had a really strong year, and you wonder about his ability to be able to put two seasons back together. He has to stay healthy. He's a guy that's veteran, and Brossoit comes over. Laurent Brossoit, and he's a 2-year, $6.5 million contract. They feel pretty good. I mean, they feel pretty good about it. That's where they need to maybe get better because that's one of the weak spots. They have a couple guys in the system that aren't necessarily have developed that they started to develop, and then they maybe hit a wall. So I think that's one of those things where they have to rely on their defensemen to step up, and they need to go into this season expecting guys like, we haven't even mentioned one of the things that they're excited about with defensemen, and I think it's all related to the goaltending. If they're stronger with their defense, they're going to be better between the pipes. But Artie Levshinov was the number 2 overall pick of the recent draft, and he's going pro. He's not returning to Michigan State. Don't know if they're in a position to be able to depend on him, but he is the number 2 overall pick. He has the skill, and they aren't ruling it out. So I think that's another thing to possibly look at, but that's getting younger. And as it pertains to just their overall defense, you need that to be stronger, more complete and consistent and predictable, and that will improve the goaltending. Peter Mrazek, though, was very solid and consistent, more so, I think, than a lot of people expected him to be last season, and I think they're hoping that continues.
I'm going to go generic on you for a second because people ask me all the time, what are the Stars' biggest rival? And maybe Minnesota, I guess. I don't know because they moved to Dallas, but here in Texas, there really isn't a rivalry. And then I'm thinking about Chicago, and I'm like, okay, Winnipeg has Minnesota, and every time they get together, really physical. Would it be St. Louis for Chicago?
Well, the St. Louis, that rivalry is always going to be tried and true because now they're still play each other a lot, and the history is there. So you can't go wrong in saying that. In recent years, they've also developed a nice little back in the heyday of last 10, 15 years, the Preds have been a nice rivalry, but it's always still at any given time, Gavin, in Chicago, it's still going to be Detroit sucks chance can break out. Whether it's a Bears game, a Cubs game, or definitely a Hawks game. When they play the Red Wings, it's still there, even though they're now not in the same conferences necessarily, even though, you don't have to go through Detroit to get to anywhere in the playoffs. They're in different conferences. It still remains, I think, the Detroit Red Wings' biggest rivalry with the Chicago Blackhawks. And I think it's always going to be that way just because of the history.
Who does David have in his top 3, and how do you think this Central Division is going to turn out? I will tell you, I've told all of our guests, I'm just throwing this out there. New city for the Yotes, now the Utah Hockey Club, packed arena, some really nice defensive pieces, I think, on that Utah. So I think Utah is going to kind of hang around that wild card race for a bit.
Do you really?
I do.
That's crazy.
I know. I'm just throwing it out there to everybody so that if it happens, then I look good.
Okay, so I'm really intrigued by – I've always loved watching the Oilers, and I know that is then not exactly going out on a limb, but what Stan Bowman his presence might mean, I'm going to watch them really closely. And the Avs, in the West. I think they've got to look at that. Now, if you want me just to stick in the Central, I think Avs, Stars, and I don't think the Hawks can make that big of a dent, that big of a jump. Utah is going to be very interesting, but let's if I'm looking Western Conference, I still like the Oilers. If I'm looking Central Division, I still think it's Avs, Stars, and probably Minnesota.
Okay. You mentioned Bowman. Were you surprised when he was reinstated how quickly Edmonton snatched him up?
I know this. When Stan Bowman, when you remove, and I don't know that you can do this, but from a strictly hockey perspective, of having somebody who understands the salary cap and how to manage it and manipulate it to a team's advantage, Stan Bowman has tremendous respect around the league. And certainly what he did in Chicago speaks for itself from a hockey perspective. Now, whether or not that a team wanted to take all that came with hiring Stan Bowman, that's certainly their prerogative, and that's certainly something that they vetted, and they'll have to live with any fallout or any repercussions. But from a strictly hockey perspective, nothing would surprise me for teams that look at him as maybe a solution to a problem. If the problem is, how do we get better at managing our cap? How do we get more organized in terms of talent evaluation throughout our organization? How do we mine the international field in terms of looking for talent abroad? Because Stan Bowman did all of those things successfully enough in Chicago to contribute to 3 Stanley Cups in 5 years.
What is it going to take for Sean and RJ on The Fan here to get closer to you as far as America's best morning shows?
Well, there's some questions that I can't answer and some I have no solution to. That may be one of them. No, thanks a lot. That's fun. We have a good time here, Mully and I. This is a great time of year because, as you said, the Bears, this is week 1 of the NFL season. And I don't need to tell you in Dallas what that means. The Cubs are making a little bit of a run. The White Sox are making history for the wrong reasons. Yeah. But right around the corner, you have hockey. We don't have a ton of hockey guys at the station, but I love and am excited about hockey in Chicago again. My son played hockey. I loved being a hockey dad, and something easy to get excited for. So Connor Bedard has reignited this fan base. And we talk a little hockey, but maybe because we don't talk a lot of hockey, that's why we're still talking on the air, right?
No, that is absolutely terrific. I will give a suggestion. I had Al Montoya on a couple of weeks ago. He's with the Stars Community Affairs, grew up a Chicago kid, I think he's the first Cuban American to get into the NHL. Terrific interview, David.
That'd be great. That's good to know.
Yeah, amazing story. And, drafted in the top 10 overall. He's like, all right, this is going to be great. New York Rangers, here I go. And then all of a sudden, some guy named Lundqvist shows up. So, but he's got great stories. He's played with some of the best. So I'm happy to pass along his information because he loves the Chicago area. So
that's great to know.
An FYI.
Look forward to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're an absolute beast. I know you've just came off a morning show. So cool of you to join us. Thank you so much. All of our previews have been terrific, and you brought a lot to the table, and it's so great to learn about the Blackhawks as we head into this NHL season. Thanks so much, David.
Thanks, Gavin. Anytime.
And thank you for listening to Spits and Suds. We'll have another preview. Tomorrow we go to Utah and find out about the new hockey club in Salt Lake City. That's tomorrow on Spits and Suds. Have a great day, everyone.